Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we're going to be talking about one of the strongest characters in Genshin Impact, Beidou. Beidou's an amazing carry who can be played both as a DPS and a sub-DPS, a support. And so I want to break down why she's so broken, why she's such a powerful unit that you should be using. I'm going to start by breaking down the ridiculous scalings on her abilities and talk about her strengths, especially in the current Abyss. And I'm also going to clear a lot of misconceptions regarding her kit and her energy cost, which a lot of people overvalue, making her far too underrated. Anyways, I'm really excited to talk about Beidou and show her full potential, so I want to keep the intro short. If you guys don't know, I stream most nights on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested, and let's get right into it. So first up, one of the reasons why she's so powerful is because of her ridiculous scaling. While her burst is her best ability and the main reason to run her, her skill is also pretty broken, and so we're going to talk about this first, and then we'll move on to her burst. Her skill, if you don't know, is a parry that can be used in a few different ways. It is a press or hold ability. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'll try to make it very simple. Basically, there's three forms of parry. There's a set amount of damage you do when you just tap it, there's a set amount when you get hit once while holding, and another amount when you get hit 2 times when you hold it. So basically, in order to get full damage, you need to get hit twice while holding it. However, you can also do a perfect parry by tapping it as soon as you get hit. So in order to play Beidou optimally, every single time you parry, you're going to basically try to get a perfect parry. You're going to press it as soon as you get hit, you'll deal the max amount of damage, and the scaling on this thing is absolutely ridiculous. So while the base damage might not seem that high, you do get bonus damage by either taking damage, holding E and taking damage, or doing a perfect parry, which is what you should normally be doing. Now the timing is actually pretty precise. You have about 20 frames or a third of a second to get the perfect parry off, but as you can see, when you do it, it does a ton of damage. It gives you 4 particles, which is a lot, and it's very fast. It doesn't take as much time as if you hold and wait to get hit. It's just usually the optimal way to parry. And so I always recommend utilizing this passive, and while it will take some getting used to, while it can be quite difficult to get perfect parries down every time, in places like the Abyss, there's usually a lot of enemies that attack very fast, like Geo Vishaps or even like Lectors and Heralds, in a predictable fashion to where parrying isn't as hard as it seems. That being said, I still do mess it up quite often. It isn't the easiest thing in the world, but it is something you will get used to just by playing Beidou a lot. So apart from just her skill being pretty good, the main reason she's broken is actually her burst. Her burst is a off-field ability. Basically, you press it, and then there's like this ring around you that'll do a bunch of lightning discharges. You can do a maximum of 1 per second, and then when you auto-attack, the discharge will bounce between enemies, and it can bounce even more. So it bounces a lot of times, but it depends on your constellations. Basically, your constellation 2 is a damage spike, giving you even more bounces. Just the lightning damage alone is very high, and yes, I'm a high talent level, but even at lower levels, this is what you get on every single bounce, and you are bouncing an insane amount of times, especially if, there's at least 2 enemies. I'm going to include on screen right now the damage output of Beidou's burst from KeqingMains, so definitely check them out, shout out to them. But as you guys can see, the scaling is absolutely insane, and it shows talent level 6 on the left. This is the main reason why I believe Beidou is so broken, because her burst deals more damage than a lot of DPS characters, and on top of that, you can do other things while the burst is active. All you have to do is normal attack, and then you can be DPSing on another character like Child, or even just DPSing on Beidou. And just to clarify, her damage is at its peak against exactly 2 targets, but even against anything more than 2, she's amazing. And against only 1 enemy, it is worse, but it's still not bad. And once again, in most of the endgame content like Abyss, in the hard content, there is almost always multiple enemies. Speaking of which, in the current Abyss, Beidou is one of the strongest units if you look at what the mobs are. In all the hard Abyss floors, like 9 through 12, there's a lot of enemies, and especially Abyss 12 that has always like 2 or 3 enemies, Beidou shines exceptionally well. And so the TLDR of this part is that her burst is ridiculously powerful, and her skill is also pretty good. Also, I want to add 2 things. Number 1, your burst snapshots, if you didn't know. Snapshotting just means that the buffs are factored in the whole time. So if you Bennett ult and then Beidou ult, you'll be buffed the entire duration of your Beidou's ult, even if you run out of Bennett circle or whatever. And that is absolutely huge because the duration of your burst is 15 seconds. And so having a buff that lasts 15 seconds is rare, but if you snapshot, that doesn't need to be the case. You just buff your Beidou at the start of your burst, and it'll be buffed for the whole time. Lastly, in case it wasn't clear enough, the talent priority for your Beidou should be your burst first and then your skill. Now, I do want to talk about her energy cost. A lot of people in the community overestimate this energy cost and how much ER you need on Beidou, and a lot of people undervalue her for it. I'll demonstrate it in a clip a bit later in the video, but it really isn't that big of a deal if you know how to play around it. Because she has an 80 energy cost, you effectively just run her with Fischl, and it solves all of her energy problems, and you're good to go. Basically, in order to meet this energy requirement, right, which might seem high, you can either stack a lot of energy recharge on your pieces, or you can do what I do, run very low ER, but have Fischl as an electro battery. And honestly, I never recommend running Beidou without Fischl. I always think you should pair them together because Fischl solves all of your problems. Fischl's Oz acts as not only a strong off-field support who helps your Beidou by dealing a lot of single target damage, but he also generates a ton of electro particles. And so because of that, he's constantly feeding the particles to your Beidou, who will be like on field DPSing or doing whatever, allowing her to passively gain her burst back while it's up and get it on cooldown, even with relatively low energy recharge. Now, the exact amount of ER you need depends. I run very low ER on a main DPS Beidou. So when she's out on the field DPSing, or when she is the other DPS in a child team, when I'm using child and then I swap into Beidou in his downtime, I don't need a lot of ER on her because she will be on field picking up the particles. Now, if you are running her as a pure support where you don't swap into her much, she will obviously get less energy, which makes ER a lot better and more needed. And we'll talk more about her artifacts in a little bit, but basically this energy cost is high, but it really isn't that big of a deal. You just pair her with Fischl and it solves the energy problems, and you don't need that much ER. On top of that, Beidou and Fischl give you the electro resonance by running both of them together. And because of that, you gain particles just by proccing reactions. So as you can see, proccing Electrocharge, which you usually will be in a Beidou team with Fischl and Xingqiu, has a 100% chance to generate an electro particle every 5 seconds. So to show you guys what I mean, I'm going to do a quick showcase of one rotation with very low energy recharge, so 117. And I'll show you guys just how fast I can get my burst. Now keep in mind, I usually recommend a bit more energy recharge than this. We'll talk about it in the artifact section, but you can run somewhere from like 120 to 140, something like that. But I'm just going to show you guys that even with this low energy recharge, I can get my burst back on cooldown, and that the 80 energy cost isn't that big of a deal if you do run Fischl. So I'm just going to do one rotation, not really focusing on the damage I'm dealing, mainly just, one normal rotation for some particles. So I'm going to do this, and I Zhongli shielded so I don't die. And as long as I hit those perfect parries like I did right there, I should get enough particles to get my burst back even with very low energy recharge. So right here I hit a perfect parry, boom, get 4 particles from that, and now my burst is back up with 6 seconds to spare. So I arguably have too much ER. Now again, this is with perfect parrying and good rotation, so once again you can run more, but this is just to show you that even at very low energy recharge, I get my burst back despite it costing 80 energy. And so that goes to show you that this 80 energy cost is not that big of a deal if you do run her with an electro battery like Fischl. It's very easy to play around and you can maximize your damage without needing like a ton of ER. So I tried to keep this initial section of why Beidou is so broken organized. I hope I did a good job and didn't really confuse anyone, because there really is so much to talk about Beidou. Like if someone asks me why is she so good, it's really a lot of things and not just one in particular. That being said, her burst and the scaling on it is absolutely insane, and I hope I did a good job at conveying that. With that being said, let's move on to some specifics about how to build her to maximize her damage and really make her feel pretty broken. A quick rundown of her weapons, artifacts, and team comps. So now for Beidou's builds is pretty straightforward. For your artifact sets, you actually have quite a few good options, making her pretty easy to build. You can run her on 2-piece Thundering Fury with 2-piece Noblesse Oblige, giving you 15% electro damage bonus and 20% damage to your burst. This is usually ideal and what I run and recommend. However, there's a few other good sets that can be good or better depending on a lot of things. First of all, the 2-piece Glad can replace one of the other 2 pieces if you have better substats, because 18% attack is pretty nice for your overall kit. Also, something to keep in mind is that Thunder Soother can potentially be the best or very good in situations where you're electrocharging. So if you're running her with Xingqiu and you're constantly electrocharging, constantly keeping the enemies afflicted by electro, this 35% damage bonus is great and buffs your whole kit. Now the difference from Thunder Soother and 2TF to Noblesse is that here your burst gains 35% damage and your skill only gains 15, whereas with Thunder Soother your whole kit gains 35, but this one requires more setup or once again an electrocharge team. So both can be good, and it usually depends on substats / how you play her, but for overall gameplay I recommend a 2-piece Thundering Fury with 2-piece Noblesse Oblige. For your artifact stats, first of all, your goblet is going to be electro. Even if you are DPSing, like your main carry is Beidou, yes, your normal attacks are physical, but electro damage goblet is usually just better because of how much your burst deals. For your circlet, you want crit, so either rate or damage depending on your ratio. Try to keep it balanced at like a 1-to-2 ratio is always good. For your sands, I generally recommend an attack % sands, but energy recharge can be viable. Basically, if you're building a good team for Beidou, an optimal team, where you're running her with Fischl and doing good rotations to like get parries in and get particles on Beidou, you don't need a ton of energy recharge. And so if you run energy recharge on the sands, you actually lose out on quite a lot of damage. You can run it if you find that your Beidou needs energy recharge, or if your team comp isn't optimal or anything like that. But overall, attack % will give you more damage and is better if you can afford to run it. So overall, energy recharge sands is viable, but I recommend running attack % sands with just enough energy recharge on the substats. Having pieces that have good substats of energy recharge can help you get just enough ER, just enough that you need or enough to be comfy without going overboard. And so obviously the substats you're looking for on Beidou are crit, rate, and damage. Energy recharge is really good too. And lastly, attack percent can be fine as well. And just because I assume people are going to be asking for elemental mastery, because, you know, electrocharged and electro reactions did get sort of buffed in 1.6, elemental mastery still isn't worth building despite the buff. For Beidou's weapons, you'll be happy to hear that there's a lot of good options for every type of player. That being said, I still see people running a lot of like bad options on her, suboptimal options, because of a lot of misconceptions and overvaluing some weapons like Rain Slasher. So that being said, let's talk about what's actually good on Beidou. First of all, Serpent Spine is what I generally recommend to anyone who buys the Battle Pass because it's an amazing option giving you crit rate and an insane amount of damage, 6% more damage when you're on the field, stacking up to 5 times, so 30% more damage at Refinement 1, and it gets significantly better with the refinement. On top of that, if you didn't know, you can start any Abyss floor with all 5 stacks just by waiting a bit before starting. The main downside of this claymore is that the base attack is relatively low, but if you run Bennett in team comp with Beidou on Serpent Spine, he gives you so much attack, especially with Noblesse Oblige, that it definitely makes up for this and makes Serpent Spine potentially her strongest weapon. First of all, in terms of 5 stars, if you do have them, they're all really good. Wolf's Gravestone is the best out of them, and Skyward Pride is also good if you need the energy recharge. Other than that, your best free-to-play option is the Prototype Archaic, the Blacksmith Claymore that just gives you a ton of attack percent. However, there are some better 4 stars too, like the Lithic Blade, especially if you are running other Leeway characters in your team. And usually you're going to be running like Beidou with Xingqiu, so that's, let's say, 2 Leeway characters, which is already good, giving you some nice crit rate. Lastly, the Blacklift Slasher can also be better than Prototype Archaic. It is pretty good. The only downside is that it does cost Star Glitter, and it might not be worth spending it for that slight upgrade. Lastly, Sacrificial Greatsword is probably the best of the 4-star energy recharge swords because it has a high base attack, gives you some energy recharge, and lets you spam your elemental skill. It can reset it, allowing you to do like 2 perfect parries in a row if you can manage that. I still personally prefer Prototype Archaic to Sacrificial Greatsword, but this can be a decent option. Also regarding Rain Slasher, I see a lot of people running this, and personally I hate it. And the reason for that is because the only good thing about this weapon is its effect. It increases the damage in Electrocharge teams specifically, like only when you're running Electrocharge with Beidou Xingqiu is this effect pretty good. But apart from that, everything kind of sucks. Like the base attack is low and Elemental Mastery isn't that useful on Beidou because your reaction damage from Electrocharge isn't that significant compared to other sources like your burst and your skill. And so while this weapon can technically be okay at high refinement in Electrocharge comps, I really don't like it and don't recommend it over the other options that I mentioned previously. Now we're going to talk about Beidou's team comps that make her really powerful. So first of all, I want to say you can run her as a DPS or a support, but I'm going to talk about the comps where she shines the most. So first of all, you're usually going to run Beidou with Fischl for the reasons I mentioned earlier. She covers your weaknesses, she's your Electro Battery, and you do get the Electro Resonance. Apart from Fischl though, your third character is usually going to be someone like Xingqiu. Xingqiu is a perfect character to run with them because you can constantly proc Electrocharge and he just does a ton of damage. His ranged swords will amplify your team's damage greatly by being another strong off-field support, much like Fischl. Also, Xingqiu is replaceable with Child. They are actually very interchangeable. Xingqiu is usually better single target, whereas Child is better against multiple enemies because of his Riptide, and they are both very good. Now, a lot of people think that when you run Child with Beidou, like he's the carry, but in reality, Beidou is going to be the one doing the most damage in this Fireworks team. So generally speaking, I tend to run Child or Xingqiu with Beidou Fischl, and then the last character is usually a healer. Since these three are your core, you can run someone like Bennett to heal you and amplify your damage. His burst obviously is broken, you guys already know, especially with Beidou because her burst does snapshot. Other than Bennett, there are pretty good options. If you need a shield, someone like Zhongli instead of a healer, or even Diona can work pretty well. And Jean works very well in this team too because you can swirl elements, proc the Verdescent Venerer set, reducing the resistance of enemies to Electro, and amplifying your Beidou and Fischl's damage. Lastly, you can include Fischl Beidou in a lot of teams, like a Sucrose Taser comp or even like a Eula main DPS team. Having Fischl Beidou as your off-field supports can increase your damage. Alright, so now we're going to do a full Abyss 12 clear just to showcase the power of Beidou. I'm going to be running Beidou, Fischl, Child, and Bennett. And while Child's oftentimes going to be DPSing on field, Beidou and Fischl are going to be the ones doing the most damage, especially Beidou. I'm running her on a Serpent Spine with 2 Thunder Fury, 2 Noblesse on a 68-177 ratio. So let's get into it. So overall, Beidou's an amazingly strong 4-star character, great at DPS and support, and can carry you in most content, especially the current Abyss. I hope I did a good job at explaining why I believe Beidou is so broken, so powerful, and the reason I'm putting broken in like the title and stuff is so that people actually start appreciating Beidou more, because she really doesn't get the credit that she deserves. So I tried to include like why she's so strong at the start of the video, and then also give you guys a full guide, because while you're here, you might as well learn how to play her optimally. So I hope I helped. I hope it was informative. Be sure to let me know if you liked the video format and just anything else, because I do read most comments. I hope you enjoyed. Lastly, I'm including a lot of useful resources in the description below, like the KeqingMains and Zanto's Beidou resources. And with that being said, I hope this video helped you. Feel free to like and sub if it did. I do appreciate it. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.